Yeah, so Jaiden's pretty cool. She's a gamer, she's funny, sometimes even edgy.
Huh, I got that feeling. Like this was the start of something really bad. The little snowball of horribleness that was about to start barreling down the hill of f*** you and crash right into my little...
But you already know she's cool. So what I'm here to talk about is not her personality, but her craft. Because what I love about Jaiden Animations is that her craft strikes an almost perfect balance between efficiency and quality, in a way that upcoming storytime animators should absolutely look up to and learn from. Because animation is really hard, and the way Jaiden does it is absolutely genius. We can find her using 3 different methods of animating. First off, we've got what critics so lovingly call slideshow animation. Just a series of still images edited quickly enough to not get boring.
But a few weeks later, when we had another test, it turns out the same guy used, a pen to fill out his test. Really, guy? Really?
And it may not be perfect, but it is efficient. On the opposite side, we've got full-out 12 frames per second animation. This is the most fun, but it's also by far the most work, and trying to make an entire video with this kind of animation is generally not worth it. So Jaiden will save it for key moments.
Not gonna lie, their battle music kinda bangs though.
One method is a bit suboptimal, and the other is in no way sustainable. But fortunately, Jaiden's got a third middle option.
Hey, Dawn! Jess said you wanted these over there. What? No, they're the knives you wanted. Yeah. You sure? Okay, catch.
See, animation typically works by drawing what are called keyframes, and then drawing frames between them to move from one to the other. Keyframe animation works the same way, except it skips these tween frames. Sure, having these frames might be smoother, but it can also take 2, 3, or 10 times as much work. So keyframe animation allows us to have that illusion of motion without having to spend so much time. And you'll see Jaiden using this basically everywhere. Except, she'll often put a clever twist on it. Take a look at this animation.
Whenever someone puts on one of my videos in front of me, I still want to slam my head on the counter.
2 or 3 prep frames at the top, instantly a single frame at the bottom, instantly back to the top, and then she rocks back and forth. Middle, left, right, middle. Basically, this is just keyframe animation, but she adds extra frames to add this kind of bounce effect. And with just a few extra frames, the animation feels so much more alive. And she doesn't even need to take the time to draw each frame, because these are all the same, just moved left and right. So what we've got here is actually 4 different methods of animation. None of them is right or wrong, and what Jaiden will do is switch between them depending on what she wants and the time she has. Because figuring out how to save time is the most important thing any animator can learn. Have you heard of the artist's compromise? No? Well, that's because I just made up the term. But it's definitely a real concept. The idea that every artist has to balance quality and production. Because sure, it'd be nice if Jaiden could spend 6 years on a video to have full animation. But if she did that, you wouldn't know who she is. Because she wouldn't have made it on YouTube. So Jaiden doesn't spend 6 years on a video. She spends about 1 month. This isn't a magic number. Different storytime animators will have different upload schedules. And each creator needs to figure out their own unique balance. And because this balance is so important, techniques that can help save time become absolutely essential. So let's take a look at Jaiden's. The first technique she uses is looping animation. Take a look at these guys. This looks really impressive. It is impressive, but the way she did it is actually really smart. We've got 9 characters here, but she only draws 3 of them and then copies each twice. Each unique character loops through 2 keyframes, set at different times so you don't know they're the same. And the result is beautiful, stupid chaos.
And dealing with stupid people, leaving stupid comments, and generally being stupid, I really am grateful.
Looping animations is a very intuitive way to save time, but another method is a lot less intuitive. Because our next method involves not animating at all. Because Jaiden knows how to take advantage of her software. Most of this can be done in either the animating or editing software, but the important thing is just how easy our computers make things like translation and rotation. For something like the sun, some rotating sunbeams. Or for some clouds, just translate them across the screen. These are very simple, but don't forget that translation can also be used to mimic camera movement. Here, by moving the background and foreground in opposite directions, we get that feeling like we're circling the camera. The opening of Fire Red is a great example of translation being used to simulate angling and rotation of the camera. And we can see Jaiden getting really good at choosing the right speeds for the right distances to give her world that 3D feel. Okay, pause. Take a look at this minimalist aesthetic. Now, I'm not gonna claim that it's better than if it were colored in, but I'm also not gonna claim that it's worse. Because as so many mentioned on my Vune video, minimalism is absolutely a style, and the added bonus of not having to spend as much time doesn't make it any worse. And Jaiden's minimalist style goes beyond just white backgrounds. When she does have color, it's often very desaturated, which gives it this smooth pastel feel. Sometimes it's so desaturated, it's hard to even tell it's there. And these simple color schemes go well with the simplicity of her characters. Yes, this can lead to same face syndrome, so if we need to differentiate, Jaiden makes sure to give each character defining characteristics. All of these techniques are incredibly helpful, but now that we've saved time, we can now spend that time doing something awesome. For an intense moment, she'll add some shading. And while she can't fully animate entire videos, she can for a key moment. Leaning away from saving time for a moment, let's move towards some more general storytime animation tips that we can learn from Jaiden. Tip number 1, switch up where the subject is on the screen. Sometimes that's centered, sometimes left side, sometimes right side, and sometimes even itty-bitty tiny in the corner.
Boo, too cliche. Yeah, I agree.
A more advanced tip is to lip sync the animation. It's not absolutely necessary, but it's really nice if you can. For one, full animation is typically at 12 frames per second, but when lip syncing, she does something much higher.
Okay, and I'll never forget what he says.
She might be using some sort of auto lip sync to audio option, or since lip syncing involves reusing frames, maybe she's just okay putting in the extra effort for a better sync with her voice. I'm not sure because I'm not an animation expert. I'm just an enthusiast. So lip syncing is an area where I'm learning just as much as you are.
So I've been on YouTube for a bit now. My 3-year anniversary.
In one small section of her talking, I spy 9 different mouth frames. Taking a closer look, we can discover several interesting things. For one, Jaiden always puts a line inside the mouth. Sometimes it represents a tongue, sometimes teeth. But the important thing is that it prevents the mouth from feeling empty. Secondly, tiny mouth, big mouth. Animation often exaggerates, and lip syncing is no exception. A wide mouth is very wide. A tiny mouth is very small and pushed over to the side. When we look at all the frames together, we can see a basic animation process with 3 keyframes. We've got tiny mouth, wide mouth, and closed mouth. For specific F sounds, the closed mouth is actually replaced by this frame. Look at how these curved lines show the stress marks of the teeth on the lower lip to show that F sound. The remaining frames are all tweens. 3 between the tiny mouth and wide mouth, and 2 between the wide and closed. But Jaiden rarely uses all of the frames in a single motion, because she has to make sure the frames match her specific cadence.
So I've been on YouTube for a bit now. My 3-year anniversary is July 23rd, which might not seem like much.
But let's move on to an easier tip. Create different versions of your avatar. We all know Jaiden's classic avatar, but she's also got a few other versions. We've got Chibi Jaiden, Stickman Jaiden,
Okay, wait, that might have sounded super pretentious.
and even Crazy Jaiden.
And if you disagree, you can get out.
This isn't a hugely important thing, but switching into different styles can be kind of fun. And tip number 5, an important tip, nobody's perfect. I mean, look at these goofy looking hands. Because as much as I love Jaiden's craft, she's not Michelangelo.
If you think I'm some sort of animation expert, stop that. I still have no clue about anything. I could be doing everything wrong. I probably am. I always thought, man.
And that's okay, because no one cares if a hand looks a little goofy. Because storytime animation has never been about creating some new avant-garde genre. It's about the stories and the creators and how those creators represent themselves through their art. So screw the haters. They don't know jack about art. And they don't know jack about you. And a certain one of them doesn't know jack about Jaiden. My first impression of DaftPina was actually largely positive. For one, as a connoisseur of YouTube, seeing a creator explore the craft behind creators was kinda cool. And 2, there's something charming and gripping about his weird, pausing cadence.
Oh, hello there. I saw you walk in. Do you notice the new painting?
But there's one very large, very big problem. DaftPina, when talking about animation, is way out of his depth.
I'm not an expert, but then again, if me, not an expert, points out things to fix in your art, those things were very obvious, and you should probably fix those things.
Oh, Mr. DaftPina. I regret to inform you, you are very, very wrong. Some of his so-called criticisms are just plain dumb.
Also, her one sentence for her description is grammatically wrong.
And I can only wonder, who cares? When have you ever judged a creator based on a description of their video or channel? This is such a petty thing to criticize. Other criticism will be paradoxical.
Video-wise, she has a lot of speed paints that she should just unlist her private since they're just cluttering up her video catalog. And sometimes she makes live-action videos, which are actually nice, since variety is good.
Here he condemns her speed paints for clogging up her catalog, but then praises her live videos for adding variety. But both the praise and criticism can be easily switched with nothing changed. Without any added reasoning, this just comes off as personal bias. Or he'll actually make an interesting observation, but then will incorrectly evaluate how that observation affects a creator's content.
Many people place their character on the right side of the screen with a 3/4 angle of the character, and it looks good. But the problem with Spetchy's videos is that her character is facing the viewer, and there's a lot of empty space right here.
The observation that Spetchy faces the camera directly despite being on the edge of the screen is actually kinda interesting. But then he tries to show an example proving that this is bad.
That'd be like if I placed my chair right in the corner right here. Man, doesn't that look terrible?
No. No, it does not. And I know it doesn't, because Folding Ideas does this exact same thing, and he does it very intentionally and to much success.
As you do this, I didn't get out to nearly as many films this year as I would have liked, and many of the films
And
I did...
over and over and over, DaftPina will constantly ignore the idea of the artist's compromise.
Everything in the video just looks rushed. And that's because she's trying to put a video out about every week for some reason.
Really? You don't know how YouTube works? He'll constantly make these criticisms without acknowledging that often the things he's criticizing are intentional compromises made by the creators to streamline their production process.
Adam changes his positions with a squash and stretch motion to make it look like slight movement.
But maybe these are understandable mistakes. So let's take a look at an example of DaftPina demonstrating that he is absolutely incapable of identifying good animation.
Oh, I did find this piece of animation she did back in November, which looks terrible. I'm gonna fix this animation. Ba-ba-boom, look, mine's better.
Daft claims that Spetchy's animation is bad. And compared to a Disney animator, maybe it is. But then, Daft attempts to fix it. And his attempt to fix it reveals far more about him and his mindset than it does about Spetchy. And despite him claiming it's better, almost every facet of his new version is objectively worse. Look at the hands. Spetchy's version is actually animated and moves with a nice smooth rhythm. Her hand even has this nice flick at the end. Daft's is just more frames, but they're not changing. It's just a stiff arm rotating. Ironically, Daft's fixed animation actually removes the actual animation. And look at the jaw. Daft does a round U, while Spetchy's has a distinct cheekbone and jaw. And look at the hair. Spetchy's flows nice and smooth. Daft's is stiff and frozen. Sure, Daft's lines may be cleaner, but because of this, they also lose a lot of energy and style. There's nothing inherently wrong with clean lines, it's a cartoon staple, but with Daft's animation, the clean lines just emphasize how stiff his animation really is. Of course, depending on how much time and animation experience someone has, quality of animation is always gonna vary, and I'm never gonna malign that. Making an animation like Daft's is perfectly fine. But claiming this is better than Spetchy's is downright embarrassing. And then, DaftPina has the arrogant audacity to claim that Spetchy needs to learn physics and weight.
If she just takes the time to learn physics and weight in the realm of animation.
Bro, Spetchy's animation is better than yours in large part because she knows physics and weight. For some reason, the only thing Daft thinks is important is having lots of frames.
So what I did first was draw the first picture, and then draw the last picture, and then I drew a lot of frames to make it look smooth.
And in thinking this, he's willing to throw all of the fundamentals of traditional animation. You know, those things that are taught by a little-known studio known as Disney. Okay, let's be very clear. Gatekeeping is the last thing I want to do. I am perfectly fine with someone like DaftPina making critical videos about storytime animation, even if he doesn't totally know what he's talking about. It's embarrassing, but that's okay. What I'm not okay with is someone like DaftPina becoming blinded by their arrogance and then clumsily swinging their club of ignorance in a way that ends up hurting people. Because regardless of whether or not Daft's criticism is correct, he frames his criticism far too harshly.
His older videos were a bit lazy, unfunny, waste of time to watch.
For one, humor is subjective, and using it as a genuine criticism is always pretty iffy. But two, this is just downright mean. Perhaps the worst example of this is his treatment of Chili Panda.
I mean, I'd be ashamed if she sat next to me on a panel talking about the creative process when her art looks terrible. And if I was 22 like her, I think I'd just stop drawing and try a new hobby.
To be fair, he has since apologized, but I don't think that totally lets him off the hook. Yet, with all of this said, I still don't hate DaftPina. I don't think any of this was malicious, just a tragic byproduct of his own arrogant ignorance. And this inability to evaluate his own level as a critic ended up leading to one of the most bafflingly delusional videos I've ever seen. So the interesting thing about DaftPina is that he's actually got a really good eye for spotting artistic techniques that artists use.
Adam changes his positions with a squash and stretch motion to make it look like slight movement.
And his response to her face reveal does point out several interesting aspects of Jaiden's video.
And as we talked about before, her art style in the video is less structured than her normal videos and kind of feels like scribbles on paper.
Except there's one big problem. While DaftPina has the eye to spot artistic techniques, he doesn't have the artistic knowledge to properly understand them.
This is supposed to represent how damaged she feels in her life.
What? What? I mean, I'll give him a C+ for effort, but I think he might be stretching a bit. It's not a terrible take, but it's way too specific, and he gives zero support from the video, yet presents it like this is somehow objective. It honestly reminds me of how I'd write middle school lit papers. See, to me, if I had to guess, it seems far more likely that a less structured, chaotic art style would be reminiscent of her unstable, chaotic emotions. The artists behind Mob Psycho 100 take this concept to the extreme. And secondly, in this very video, she talks about how she'd obsess over not being good enough and how unhealthy it was.
That led me to telling myself I wasn't good enough and I had to do better. My standards slowly started getting higher and higher without me realizing how bad it was getting. By the end of high school, I felt like I wasn't good enough for anything.
So it kinda makes sense that in this one, she'd use a sketchy art style where she doesn't have to obsess over polishing up and cleaning every little line. This is just one example of DaftPina misinterpreting one of Jaiden's techniques. But trust me, there are many more examples.
Let's see a clip.
The bar keeps getting higher before I can grab it, like climbing a staircase where the top keeps getting further away and the ball and chain attached to your ankle is getting heavier and heavier. But you keep trying.
She uses this type of negative imagery to hook the audience.
What? No, it's so not. This isn't even close to right. And even if it were, why is he framing this like that's a bad thing? Hooking an audience is something you learn in Art 101. Oh yes, Jaiden tried to make the audience interested. Wow, how dare she? Bruh, these are just metaphors. It's not that complicated. And their actual purpose is to show people that haven't experienced this what it feels like. But apparently it's not working. Quinn Curio agrees with me.
Basically, Jaiden made a video about her eating disorder, and she made it in a way so that it would be sad, because it was a sad story, and she wanted the viewers to feel as she felt.
And showing people what these things feel like is pretty important, because it's really easy to undervalue the pain of something if you've never personally experienced it. In this same video, Daft, coddled within his blanket of indignant self-righteousness, bafflingly decides it'd be funny to mock Jaiden by pretending she has every mental disorder under the sun. Except, of course, the one disorder she actually had. I know I'm going hard on DaftPina, and honestly, rightly so. But I know he's not intending to make fun of mental health. Yet, his lack of awareness shows that he didn't fully understand or respect the way mental disorders can impact people. And this concept is shown vividly clear when we look at one last aspect of Jaiden's video that Daft gets horribly wrong.
And as a contrast to her normal videos, she actually isn't using any music. But there are a few times where she uses cacophonous sounds to instill an emotional response from her audience.
I felt broken and that no one could fix me. Black fog surrounded me everywhere I went and I couldn't breathe. I was so stretched thin. I was trying so hard to swim, but the waves kept coming, each one stronger than the last. But I kept going. I don't know why.
This practice is called making the video seem more serious than it actually is.
What? Oh my god, stop. Stop, just stop. Don't do it. Just stop, stop, stop. Oh my god. Yes, a video about how she'd starve herself daily and vomit out any food she ate isn't serious. Yes, having conflicts with other creators over her anxieties that could have potentially damaged her relationships isn't serious. Yes, feeling like she can barely go on isn't serious. Yes, that's a good take. Daft criticizes her for not using music, saying it's manipulative. But what is she supposed to do? If she uses fun, happy ukulele music, it's gonna be ridiculous. If she uses sad, depressing music, of course, Daft's gonna say, again, it's manipulative. So DaftPina has created this situation in his mind where no matter what Jaiden does, he's still gonna hate her for it. And I think this no-win scenario is a perfect representation of what DaftPina's mindset on Jaiden was at the time of this video. And if DaftPina gets to be an armchair psychologist, then so do I. See, DaftPina used to be an artist, but he didn't have all that much success. And in his mind, he was a failure. And I think he blames himself and his lack of talent. So when he saw a storytime animator like Jaiden getting all this massive success despite not having what he considered to be quality animation, it made him really jealous and really, really bitter. And this jealousy and bitterness ended up blinding him to who Jaiden really is. So when Jaiden came out with her face reveal, Daft's blind, bitter bias was all too ready to take any excuse to take down the person that he believed didn't deserve her success. Again, I don't think this was malicious. I think DaftPina genuinely believed he was exposing someone who was manipulating their audience. And being a living embodiment of the Dunning-Kruger effect, he didn't have the awareness to see just how pathetic his expose video really was. Fortunately, he has since taken down the video and apologized. But he seems to have this weird idea that apologizing is like Jesus with sins. That somehow, since he's apologized, we're not allowed to be mad.
And then he goes on to list his grievances, starting with my Jaiden video, which this conversation took place after I apologized to Jaiden, but I guess he forgot?
No, Daft, that's not how it works. You don't get to punch someone in the face, say you're sorry, and then expect not to have consequences. With that said, he does seem to be improving. He apologized for the Jaiden video, and he's taken down most of his old Storytime reviews. Granted, this embarrassment is still up, so I'm not asking that you cancel DaftPina. That would actually be the opposite of what I want. And in a lot of ways, I still have some respect of DaftPina as a creator, despite how mind-blowingly bad some of these videos really are. Because making mistakes and making bad videos is an important part of growing as a creator. So the goal of this video is not to punish DaftPina for a mistake he's already made. The goal of this video is to hopefully prevent future critics from making these mistakes moving forward. Part of that is gonna mean reevaluating their own level in their field, because it seems like it's always the people that know the least that throw the harshest criticism. But at the same time, whether or not a critic knows what they're talking about doesn't change the fact that hurting people is bad, and critics of all knowledge levels need to pay closer attention to how they frame their criticism. Because both critics and storytime animators should never let the fear of bad content stop them from doing what they want to do. Improvement is a huge part of the game, and you can't get better if you don't start worse. So as long as you're not hurting people, you just have to remember two things. Fuck the haters, and you do you. read this, so it's just the like button.
I always thought, man, doing YouTube would be so fun, but nah, it'd never work. I'm just me. There's nothing special about me. I never really had the thought that it could even be a possibility, you know? But here we are 3 years later with 2 million subscribers.